The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George. Hey, Lions, how's it going? I was trying to think, can I do the annoying voice and the vaguely British accent at the same time? And I settled on annoying voice is more recognizable than vaguely British, so I optimized for annoyingly high-pitched voice.
Yes, no, that the worms' voices are semi-iconic, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Well, so there it was. We played Worms Armageddon, and so, okay. I'm going to kind of roll my nostalgia experience into explaining this game, because my nostalgia experience for the Worms series is a mutual friend of ours from college. I kind of knew about it before that, but we had a friend in college who really loved this series, and that's kind of who I think of when I think of this entire franchise. Because there's a bunch of these, and we played Worms Armageddon, which originally was a PC game in 99, and then literally the next year in 2000 was ported to the N64. So we played the N64 version, which came out in 2000, that I associate almost entirely with this one friend from college.
Yes, and yeah, no, I actually played it in high school. I think actually probably if it came out in 99, I played it close to when it came out. And if not this, because there's been a whole slew of them, you know.
This one is like the third or fourth. This one isn't even the very beginning of the series.
Oh no, not even close. I like I said, I played this one, or one of its predecessors. The thing that I remember so crystal clearly was the holy hand grenade. Man, that was my. I've forgotten on whatever version I played, you could go into the settings and you could mess with, turning all of the side items on and up to infinity. It's kind of like doing the Alba bombs on Smash Brothers.
Huh. I wonder if they cribbed that configuration from games like this.
Yep, very well maybe, but yeah, we just ramped up those holy hand grenades and just kept tossing those until everyone expired, and just giggling like a moron with all of the friends who were playing it. Was like, oh no, I got you, and oh man, that was the best.
When I feel like our generation somehow claimed Quest for the Holy Grail as our own, despite it tremendously predating us, right? Like it's almost weird how much more I hear people our age talk about Monty Python, even though they're like all old enough to be our parents. Like it's a weird like claiming of the culture.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of those things that you go home and you're like, hey Dad, man, I'm really into this new movie, and it's like, oh really, what is it? It's Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they're like, are you serious? Like that was old when I was your age, kind of a thing where it's like my parents watched that, and we're like, no, it's this new thing. We are the Columbus of Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Look what I have discovered. Excuse me.
Yeah, we Columbused Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
He never go full Columbus.
No, you never go full Columbus. That's a mess.
My favorite thing about Quest for the Holy Grail, because now that's just what this episode is about, is my friend had it taped off of it was like a bootleg version, right? So someone somewhere had a legitimate copy of it, and then he had like a VHS copy of that legitimate copy. Well, Holy Grail famously just smash cuts to black when they're spoilers for Holy Grail, I guess, 40-year-old movie. Yeah. Where they, they're arrested. No, older than that. Jesus. They're arrested by the police, and then it just smash cuts to black, and they do all the credits up front in the movie, like an old fashioned movie, to make that scene possible. And him and I argued about whether or not that was actually where the movie ended for ages. because he was like, no, my dad said like that's just how the movie ends. And I was like, but it doesn't make it, because we were kids. I was like, but it doesn't make any sense. Like it just cuts to black. There's just nothing. Like the story doesn't get resolved. There's nothing. Like I think this video isn't finished, and you didn't get the full movie. Like it took me years to accept that is actually how that movie ends.
And so then for my portion of Monty Python, if that's what we're going to do, so have you played any Hearthstone?
I have not. I've never been a big CCG guy.
It's actually I have it on my phone, and it's one of my just play for 5 minutes. I probably spent $10 on it over like 5 years. But that being said, is that there is a 10 mana, which is the most, right? 10 mana cost card in there called Dark Moon Rabbit, and it has Rush and Poisonous, which means that if no matter how much damage it deals, it kills the minion, right? Rush means it gets to attack immediately, and it also damages the minions next to whomever it attacks, right? And literally, it's just a picture of a rabbit crouched over several suits of armor. And I'm like, this is a Monty Python reference.
And it's subtle.
Yeah, right? But again, that is how much Monty Python has pervaded our generation and culture, to where it's just people just kind of expect for you to get why this singular rabbit would be a 10 cost card. I forget what the actual rabbit's name, because it has a name in the movie.
The enchanter is named Tim, right?
Some call me Tim.
Yeah. Crap. I think you're right. I think the rabbit does have a name.
Yeah, because it's like a monster, Yeah.
Well, the guide knows exactly what it is, and they're like, it's a bunny rabbit. Yeah. Anyway, we should probably at some point get back on track.
At some point.
Yeah.
So we played Worms.
Worms Armageddon.
Worms Armageddon. Yep.
But yeah, so let's chill a little bit.
Let's do it.
So we got some new followers on the Twitters. We got a couple new patrons last week. We got a couple really thoughtful podcast reviews that I cannot remember if I made you aware of or not, but I promise you they were very sweet. All of that stuff is just an absolute delight. Like every time I get to start a new episode by saying like, smart people came and said interesting things to us on the internet about video games, and nice people left us thoughtful reviews that like have callbacks into old episodes and things like this. It feels really, really good. Patrons obviously help us keep the lights on. So every time someone's like, I will give you some of my money, that helps keep the show running. So we have to, of course, make sure we call out our 8-bit classic, Michael S., and our 16-bit hero, Jacob K., because everybody's money helps keep the light on. They just give the most money, so for them, the light shines brightest.
Yes, because money can be exchanged for goods and services and bright lights,
Also peanuts.
Yeah. I mean, it's all money. Yeah. So visuals,
yes. You have an outline of the show. You know how it goes.
Yeah. No, it just feels like we got there faster. I feel like,
Oh, I can explain that. Neither of us have a particularly exciting nostalgia experience for this game.
Yeah, I was going to say, despite us faffing about for 5 minutes talking about Monty Python, this part still came up faster. I'm like, is this right? But
yeah, no, we're there, and it's I knew when I was actually writing out my show notes, I was like, this is like 2 or 3 games recently that I'm just like, I'm boring about this.
Yeah, no, actually, I have a ton in gameplay. Visuals for this one for me was pretty sparse.
Really? Because there's a thing I have in my notes that I was like, he must have hated this.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there was a bunch of like I said, game mechanic stuff that I kind of honed in on, and so it is not for there not being anything to speak about on the visuals. It is just simply not where I leveraged my efforts.
That's fair. There are lots of things with visuals that I think we've both struggled in the past with. Like, do I want to complain about how this looks or how this looks affects playing the game? Because it is sometimes a difficult line to straddle. So here's kind of my summary of my feelings on the visuals. They are fun, cartoony, very reminiscent of like Earthworm Jim, right? Everything feels like it's not shaped exactly right, right? Like there's one of the levels is all like paint supplies, and it's so like the can isn't like a perfect cylinder. It like kind of leans a little bit, like it's skewed. One of the levels is all like football themed, but the helmet isn't really quite the right shape. It's like squashed a little bit. Like there's just stuff like that is pervasive throughout. There's totally recognizable shapes. You know exactly what this thing is supposed to be, but it's like it's just a little squashed or stretched or something, like skewed a little bit. And that just made me think of Earthworm Jim.
Yeah, or similarly to me, Toe Jam and Earl, you know?
Yes.
Like where it's just kind of
everything. The 90s skewed aesthetic.
Yeah, the Rocco's Modern Life, just kind of all of that, you know? Completely agreed. And again, I felt that the visuals, for the sake of visuals, I thought that they were charming. You know,
super
I really
cute.
enjoyed,
and the style has not really changed over the entire franchise. It basically looks the same, but in HD now.
Right. And I'm wondering if they decided to make this Worms, where they were like, look, the entirety about this game is going to be about the game mechanics. We don't want to have to deal with, you know, having bizarre, Worms hitboxes. We don't want to have to deal with, you know, animating like some insane, you know, arms and legs and head. So they're like, what is the simplest thing to animate? It is a worm. It is literally, you know, it's a rectangle basically, you know? So they're like, all right, that's good. That's what this will be then. It will all be cartoon worms. I could see that conversation having had happened, because all of their visual resources, all their resources in general, are kind of poured into the weapons, you know?
I would say there's the variety of weapons mechanically is pretty huge, but they all also are pretty much impossible to confuse visually. Even as small as the worms are on screen, because you have a fair amount of the level that's visible at all times, right? It's a strategy game. Mm-hmm. There's I think the 3 starter guns are the pistol, the shotgun, and the Uzi, which you would think are all just like small gray blobs that are in the tiny pink blobs, little blob hands. But even with this level of you know, visual fidelity, you could still see, oh, he's holding the pistol, he's holding the shotgun, or he's holding the Uzi, because it's really simple shapes. You know, the shotgun gets a little two-handed kind of gesture. The pistol is sort of held out like, kind of cowboys at high noon sort of gesture. And it's like, it's a tiny, tiny difference. You wouldn't want to have to like slam on your brakes in your car based on this difference. It's not that clear, but it's clear enough that in the game you can tell that they really emphasize like each weapon should look unique, because they're going to play super unique. So they should also look unique.
Well, and also too that, you know, there is a timer for your turn, and so they need to look unique enough to the point where if you equip the wrong thing, that you are likely to see that you equipped the wrong thing. Like this, this isn't, you know, Final Fantasy 2, where whichever sword you have equipped doesn't, you know, super matter, because you ditched the old one. The minute you got the +5 sword, you ditched the +4 sword, you know? You need to know which sword you have equipped, because one of them isn't a sword, it's a sword gun, you know? Pen, mightier than the sword. Pen gun, mightier than the sword gun. All this being said, is I definitely screwed that up, but that's not the point. So yeah, I thought that the visuals were very varied there, in the same way that they kind of leveraged their energy on the mechanics being very varied with the weapons. The visuals were varied with the weapons as well. This is a thing that we sometimes split up between visuals and mechanics, but the hitbox, specifically with the environment, as you blow it up, right, it changes shape, right? And what qualifies as still in front of you to where you can't shoot over it, like a bazooka. Let's just say, hypothetically, you had a bazooka and you were trying to shoot somebody else with a bazooka. The hitbox for, no, you did not shoot over the ledge, you shot yourself on the ledge, is hot garbage, in my own personal opinion. At least it doesn't feel right, because I screwed that up more times than I can count.
Yeah, and that there were 2 I don't understand shapes feelings. One was the hitbox when you're firing things that have large projectiles, like the bazooka, right? Like the mortar or any of that stuff. Grenades bounce cartoonishly, right? So you don't want to accidentally hit a wall with those because then they go in very much the wrong direction. The version of this that I found to be more teeth grinding is, I think Skyrim got its mountain climbing mechanics from this game, because there are slopes that I was like, oh, I should be able to walk up that. And then I couldn't. And it completely screwed up my plan because I couldn't climb over that slope that I expected to just casually walk over. And then there were other times that the CPU would just like, get onto its horse and put on its Dovahkiin helmet and just straight up the side of like a sheer vertical surface. I was just like, what? Like, why can you climb that, but I can't climb this like gentle 3-degree like wheelchair ramp? Like, what is happening here? And I couldn't. The materials aren't different. Like they look different, but there aren't any materials in the game where it's like, oh, this performs like metal and this performs like slippery sand or anything. Like there's none of that, right? So I think
slippery.
If you're on like sand dunes, like loose.
I mean, glass is slippery. Did you mean glass?
Okay, listen. I know because of your liquid paper white skin, you didn't spend a lot of time at the beach. But if you've ever tried to climb a steep hill that's made out of like sugary sand, it is not. You don't have a good time.
Okay, that's fair.
Did you mean glass? You asshole. No, I didn't. So I consistently felt like I couldn't tell by looking at a slope if that was a slope I could definitely get over, right? There was too wide of a range where I felt unsure. And then there were definitely a lot of times I literally shot the ground right in front of my feet because I was like, oh, I'm going to shoot down at an angle. And then nope, like just for whatever reason, that time it decided to make contact with the floor 2 feet in front of me.
And I will say, to your point, agreed. Yeah, I mean, that happened a number of times, and we'll get into this mechanics, but the cost of that mistake is not small. But that being said, is that I will say that, so visuals, for the sake of visuals, charming, visuals and how they service gameplay is really, it's really double-edged, because like I said, I really like the fact that I can quickly look at a weapon to tell you exactly what I've got equipped, and then theoretically how it's going, the weapon's going to handle once you kind of internalize how it's going to handle. But the way that the game telegraphs what you have available to you to make a sound tactical plan, for you to think tactically and strategically is not great, So to your point, where you're saying like, okay, I need to go from point A, I need to walk from point A to point B and then do thing C in order to have effect D. And you've got 90 seconds or whatever to do that. And then as you were doing it, you then spend 20 of those 10 seconds trying to crest this one hill, and then you can't. You're like, well, I was planning on dropping a stick of dynamite on that worm's head. That's something I have to be really close to do, and now I can't do that anymore. So now you're suddenly struggling to come up with a last ditch effort plan, which doesn't necessarily work. So, I did feel that, it's not very cut and dry what you can move through, what you can't move through, what effect some of your weapons are going to have on the environment ultimately. And we'll get into this more in gameplay, but some of the ways the computer is able to manipulate the environment far outstrip what any human could look at and then assess as like a possibility, So sometimes the computer would do things where I'm like, yes, that is fine. Like I don't think that you cheated, but at the same point in time, there is nothing about this game visually that would have told me to even consider that as an option. I saw the computer one time thread a bazooka missile through a tunnel I had burned through with the blowtorch and hit me. And I was like, I would not have guessed that the size of this hole was such that you could arc, because he shot it up. It wasn't like in line with me. He shot it up so he arced backwards and then flew far enough into the tunnel to hit me. And like visually, there was no way I thought that was a possibility. So like I don't have a good solution to it, because it's a kind of a sandbox game in the sense that there's no way that the developer could say this is the myriad of different ways to interact with every single environment. But I will say that there are definitely some times when things could happen that I did not anticipate happening.
You ever play pool with someone who's way, way better than you?
No, but I have seen people who are way, way better than me play pool. And yes, this would be a similar feeling to that.
I feel like that feeling is similar because so much of when you want to grind your teeth and say the computer cheated is these super tight angles, right? This incredible precision where it's like, okay, they're going to shoot a bazooka missile up in the wrong direction, knowing that they have to go over this small obstacle, and then the wind will catch it, and then they will hit me on the other side of the friggin' map. And because this is a 4x3 game, right? N64, the fact that they can draw that line across several screens of scrolling, right? All the way over there, all the way over here. I feel like a human could get that good. I have seen people who can do trick shots in billiards, right? Like, I know it's possible, but it feels like there were times that the computer made trick shots against me where I just wanted to be like, okay. I don't feel like you and I had access to the same visual information that you used, because I wouldn't have positioned myself here if I realized that bouncing the 8-ball off of the cuckoo clock in the next room was a thing that you could reasonably do, right? Like, it just, I know this sounds very mechanical, but I think it's important to frame it visually, because if they are 2 or 3 screen scrolls away, because some of the maps are very wide, if they are 2 or 3 screen scrolls away, before I like stop positioning my worm, it's really hard with that timer counting down to think what insane, trick shots could they possibly pull off from the other damn side of the map, because I don't have the whole map in front of me. It's hard, and you can't zoom in and out, right? Like zoom out, see the whole thing, zoom back into like the play size. Like that would actually be super useful, or a longer timer, or faster scrolling, or something. But like some of those angles, man, like it just, I wish it almost left a longer trail so that I could point at the screen to whoever's sitting in the room with me and be like, you see this crap?
Well, and actually, here's my kind of thought on a way to approach this that could have been better. I don't know if later Worms games did this. And honestly, it's a little antithetical to the overall aesthetic of like wacky, zany fun. But is that, give me some kind of a trajectory line for my projectiles, So like when I'm firing the bazooka, if I say like, okay, let me, and again, it's not a programming line where I'm saying like, angle it at this with this amount of strength, and then it will do the exact thing I want. But more so, if I angle it this way and am able to put this much strength behind it, what will it do? So basically,
I'm kind of imagining the way like a lot of golf games.
Yes. Where it says like, where you say, here's my angle. I'm going to take this angle. I'm going to use this club, and I'm going to put this much strength behind it. And goes, this is where the ball is going to go if you do that. And you're like, cool. And then it takes all that away, and then you have to angle it and put because I still like the idea of holding the trigger for how much power you're putting behind it. And for you to be like, okay, if I do full power, oh, no, that's not what I want. So I really need like 3/4-ish power. So you're like, okay, I know about what that should feel like, I think that would have been helpful, because having no visual aid for what's going to happen with the incredible myriad of weapons and then with each weapon being able to angle it in almost an infinite number of ways, and then being able to, with some of them, put almost an infinite number of variations of power behind it. It's kind of difficult to predict what's going to happen, which is hypercritical in a tactical strategy game, right?
And some projectiles are influenced by the wind and others aren't. So you have to memorize like, okay, I see that the wind is blowing, right? Because not only can you literally see like things falling in the background, but you've got your little windometer in the bottom right corner, which is super useful, right? Just like in golf, it's like, yeah, this is where your ball would go if the wind was dead, right? Right. So like you're making basically the exact same kind of calculations you would make in golf.
This is golf. It's golf.
It's golf.
Yeah.
It's like Hot Shots golf. It's cartoony golf, right? But what I think is, and just in case I forget to tie this back later, I'm going to talk about how steep the learning curve is on this game. And what we're talking about would give you a lot more welcoming visual, like that visual would be a lot more welcoming, right? It would change the ability for you to go from a total noob to, I have a rough idea of how to shoot people in the face, because this game often feels like the computer can see that line. Right.
I mean, I think the computer absolutely can, because the computer's drawing the line. Like it's got to.
Well, but when you program good enemy AI, you don't give them access to information that the player wouldn't have.
I think it had access to that.
I think it totally does. Yeah,
Like,
I think it totally does.
Like it's the Agent Smith. No, that's what the computer feels like. It feels like Agent Smith. Where it's like the difference between you and Smith is that Smith must follow the rules, but you can bend or even break the rules. It's like, man, I'm not Neo, and I'm not even Morpheus, man. I'm like, I'm like the guy who's eating the steak, like doesn't go into the Matrix regularly. Whatever his name was, Cypher, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that actually is right.
Ah, sweet, swinging a hit, but yeah, no, I mean, so yeah, no, I think that I totally think it could see that line. And I think that too, for this particular visual that we're hypothesizing, make it able to turn it on and off. Because I mean that is a simple options menu thing. Once you program that in, being able to turn it off has got to be banana simple, right? So.
Well, I mean, the trajectory exists. The game knows what it is. We just can't see it.
Yeah, exactly. Just give me access to this information and allow me to turn it off. So that way, I mean, it would be great because you and I, when we were first starting to play, we could just sit there and, figure out the game and all this sort of stuff. And then say like, okay, let's do a couple with the telegraph turned off. And it's like, this is going to get stupid. It's like, yeah, it is. Especially because I like the idea of being able to turn it off, because then what that would probably incentivize is way less crazy trick shots and way more running up to somebody, tossing them dynamite and running away, because you're like, I'm not going to, which is what I did. Eventually what the trick shots that the computer was doing and my skill level forced me into a weird gameplay style where I was way more like Krieg in Borderlands, where
just like a mad bomber.
Yeah, we're like, I went with the sure thing, and the sure thing was running up and being like, hey, here's a proximity mine, bye, and then just, running across the screen, like huffing it, like, oh man, I can't be here when that goes off. And then, dynamite I used a lot. I used a Hadouken, or I think it's called Dragon Ball, a couple of times.
It's called Dragon Ball in the menu, but I think the voice line is Hadouken.
Hadouken, yeah. Baseball bat was one of my besties. Liked home running people, but yeah, all of it was very in a game where there's so many different ranged weapons and stuff. I was very melee driven. That
feels on brand for you.
And especially like I remember at one point I was playing and I had one worm left and he had two, and they were both like in this area that I couldn't really get to, so I just teleported like right next to them, and like if I go out, I'm taking you with me. I just want to be right in your face when all of this goes down. And I died and I lost, but when I exploded, I hurt them too. And that was the key. I went out swinging.
Yeah. So, and I don't want to spend too much more time on this, golf shot arc that absolutely should be displayed in the UI. But the last thing I want to say, just in case I don't forget for later, is there's an easy way to make this not completely break the game, which is don't factor in wind, right? Show the arc as if there was no wind, so then the player has to account for the wind, and don't factor in ricochet, because a lot of things bounce, right? Mm-hmm. So if you give the player a little bit of information visually, right? This is an important visual we're talking about. That's why it's in the visual section.
We've been talking about visuals the whole time.
Absolutely, we have. Yeah. So you give them that little extra bit of visual information, but you don't give them perfect information that accounts for all of the other mechanics. And now you've given them a bike helmet as opposed to training wheels. And I think sometimes I would like to have a bike helmet on. That actually does bring me to something I wanted to make sure I mentioned. There are a lot of really cute little touches that I think the longer you play this game, the more you would forget that these are even happening. But like, there's the girder. You can like construct the girder. When you're positioning the girder, you have a little yellow construction hat on. And when you're using the Shoryuken or the Hadouken, you have the little red bandana on, right? And then it just like disappears, right? Like, and but you put it on. I think you tie it on. It's kind of cute.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of little visual touches. Like when you die, they look right at the camera, and then they, do the like Wile E. Coyote TNT plunger and explode themselves. Like, there's a lot of little visual touches that do not need to be there, but they lend a tremendous sense of polish that I always appreciate when I see that stuff, because I'm like, somebody cared enough to draw a little yellow construction hat on this stupid little cartoon worm. Thank you for doing that.
Well, because I think that, and again, it's in service of that kind of zany gameplay, but it lends itself almost to a more Mega Man feel, in the sense that it's not that you're not placing a girder, you're now Girder Man, like you're not equipping a Hadouken, you are taking on, you are now a martial arts expert, so it's kind of like you're downloading the program file. But again, it makes it feel like for that 1 minute, that worm has that particular skill, ability, whatever, which just sells it. It gives it a better feel. Like this is, I think, the video game equivalent of talking about like mouthfeel with like food,
Yeah.
Where it's like, does it strictly improve the flavor and all this sort of stuff? No, but if it's not there, it's just not quite right. You know?
Yeah. If every time you bit into a Cheeto, it felt like celery, you'd be like, no.
It's not quite right. It's not wrong. It's uncanny.
Yeah. The only other thing that I really wanted to make sure I mentioned for the visuals, which I realized when you started talking about the visuals, wait, he has a stronger memory of this game than I do. That's why this didn't drive him nuts. It took me longer than I'd care to admit to differentiate the background from the foreground. So there were a lot of times I was like, I'm going to shoot this dumbass in the face with my bazooka. And then I would blow a hole in the wall right in front of me, a gigantic hole, and the recoil from the explosion would launch me often into the water to my death. And I really, once I realized what was happening, I was like, okay, I need to determine what the difference is between the background and the foreground. And it's literally just saturation. Everything in the foreground is basically 100% saturated. Everything in the background is muted out like it's further away. And I was like, okay, there, I'm good. And I never shot myself in the face again on, I shot myself in the face for other reasons, not for that reason. But right. I was like, this is so annoying because you have to deconstruct the level, right? Like, so knowing what's in the foreground and in the background super matters, because sometimes you are trying to shoot the wall down. Other times you are not trying to shoot the wall down. So knowing if the wall is going to get shot or not, like, that's visual information the player needs.
Yes, absolutely. No, that did not bother me even a little bit, but I'm good at video games. So,
that's it. I forgot about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I get that, I mean, it sometimes is difficult to see the skyscraper from the point of view of an ant, but it's just sorry. I don't know, man. I don't know why I'm being such a jerk. Anyways, that's not the point. No, I do. Although I do think that my prior experience of this game it just clicked for me. Like I didn't struggle with that, but I could definitely see how somebody could. But yeah, it's kind of like where it's like run like the wind. Don't you mean wind? I've only read the word, like.
I mean, once you know the mechanic of the level is sometimes a thing you have to shoot, then like it clicked, right? Then you see the illusion, and it's fine from that moment on. But until I realized, shooting the wall is a thing I sometimes have to do on purpose, I just wasn't thinking of the world as a thing to shoot. I was thinking of worms as things to shoot. And it was like, sometimes you spawn in a level and it's like, the only way for me to get from here to there is to shoot the wall a bunch.
Yep. Or I was a big fan of the blowtorch.
You kind of go like up, like a gentle sort of slope.
You can angle it three ways. So you can angle it dead even, up at a 45, down at a 45.
Yeah.
And it was. I did have a weird experience where the game. This was one of the ones that I played where it was just a brutal slugfest. Where like it went on for way too long, and eventually my worm was completely across the stage. The other one was like and their worm was in a pit. So I used a blowtorch to get like 3/4 of the way to this dude, and then just took 20 steps back and started bazookaing my way the rest of the way through this tunnel I had made. And I'm like, this is not like, could you imagine like coal miners or something, like making an actual honest to God tunnel and being like, I don't know, man, we're out of, all of our pickaxes are broken. What's the next step? All right, it's time for the bazookas.
Maybe that's where dynamite blasting first started.
Yeah.
Man, my arms are tired. I don't want to swing this pickaxe anymore. I got this dynamite.
This stinks. It's like, man, well, and they just look over and they see a kid playing with fireworks and they're like, wait a minute.
Dinah, what are you playing with there?
It's something I might want to get involved with.
Dear Lord. Do you have anything else for the visuals?
No, that's absolutely the note we have to go out on for visuals.
Okay. So this game, like several we've played recently, which is just, it's always weird when we like bumble our way into these bizarre little patterns. This game doesn't have a lot of music. Like there's a little bit all the time, but it's like really subtle and kind of quiet ambient music. It has a melody, like it is a tune, but it's really ducked, really, really quiet. The title screen has a little bit of like a fanfare. Some of the menus have like a little bit of fanfare, but there's really not a lot of music in this game, or at least, I don't know, maybe there's later friggin' musical themed levels I didn't get to, but like there's just not a lot of music. It's kind of it's quiet. The whole focus is on the voices and the explosions.
Exactly. No, and I think that, well, first of all, there's tons of music once you get past level 10 in Deathmatch, obviously. But that being said, I think that the reason behind that is what I'm sure you're about to lead into, which is that this is another game that we played recently where the audio information that they're actually driving to the player is super important. They are actually leveraging the audio pretty heavily in this game to inform you of things that are happening. The easiest, the lowest hanging fruit to point to is the amount that you have charged your gun before you shoot it, like the bazooka, is it goes like shh, and then it fires, right? So the fact it gives you a little visual on, the strength of the gun, right? But the audio also helps. So if you eventually wanted to do those wild trick shots, right, you would need to, I think it would almost be easier to hear when you needed to fire the gun as opposed to see when you needed to fire the gun, Yeah,
so you kind of end up like, it's not triangulating because it's only two pieces of information, but you start to, the third one is your finger on the button. Haha. You start to triangulate how to get the result you want from the feeling of pressing, depressing and then releasing the button, the sound effect and the visual. I did it. I came up with 3 things. And I'm always surprised how, like, as we've, been critiquing stuff, you would not go to most people who've played this game and say, how important is the when you're firing the bazooka or throwing a grenade or whatever? They'd be like, what? Oh, right. The noise it makes. Yeah, I guess. And it's like, no, super important. You just didn't know it, but your brain did. Exactly.
No. And that type of insidious is the wrong word because that implies malintent.
Yeah, that's a pejorative.
But that means
subconscious. Maybe?
Yeah. So that type of insidious information that they're feeding into your brain, it is that where it is very subliminal as opposed to the images, which are superliminal. But they're feeding. Join the Navy. Okay. But they're feeding you that type of information constantly. And I think it's because they really are trying to give you as much information as possible so that way you can make informed decisions. Especially if you're sitting there watching worms explode. The sound that the little fire shrapnel makes a distinct sound. The sound of an airdrop makes a distinct sound. The sound of the sheep fired from the sheep gun makes a distinct sound, you know? And again, it's all so that way it can kind of help kludge the cognitive load that you're chugging trying to make all of these decisions, you know? So that's kind of why with the visuals where we said like, oh man, sometimes you just can't tell what you can get away with. I definitely don't think that they were trying to make that arcane. I think that that's an error because they were just trying as hard as they can to feed you as much information as you can because they don't want it to be their fault that you didn't know that health pickup was there. It's your fault. So the fact that, you know, they say like incoming and then the sound of a jet every time and the sound of a thing hitting the ground every time. It's like, man, if you missed that, I mean, if you were in the other room, you would know that a health drop just hit the ground. So we're trying to get your attention, and the amount of noise and not actual music, but fanfare behind the thing is proportional to how much they want to draw your attention to it. So, for example, the of the gun, right? It's like, well, you're already firing the gun. You kind of, you should be paying attention at that point. If you're in the other room and you're just hammering down the button on the gun, right? Just hoping for the best. I mean, that's kind of on you, right? But when ammo or health drops are coming in, the camera pans up to it. It makes a very distinct, like, flying noise. It makes a dropping noise. The worms comment on it. You know, like there's a whole lot of audio cues to be like, this is a thing you should be aware of because it could very well be game changing.
Okay, so you said the worms comment on it. We gotta talk about the voices, right? Like,
yeah.
You called them iconic, and I was surprised how not annoyed by them I was. Like, I really, because there's what, half a dozen or more voice options in this version of the game. I'm sure the PC version had like a million voices, but like the N64 one, I think, has like half a dozen or so voice options. There's the super iconic, like bye bye, right? Really high, sounds like a small little creature. But then there's a couple that are obviously like celebrities. It's the very 90s, you know, let's incorporate celebrities in here that children may or may not even know who we're referencing, right? One of them is kind of a Stallone, Schwarzenegger-y 80s, like, you know, like I'll be back, kind of like that sort of. I don't think they go that close to an obvious reference, but it's that sort of speaking pattern. But it's not high pitched, right? It's like
right.
a more normal masculine register. There's another one that I was like, oh, this is definitely supposed to be some celebrity, but I have no idea who they're parodying here. But there was a bunch of phrases that were too specifically phrased. I was like, this is referencing a real person or a character that an actor played repeatedly or something. But there's just just enough variety that I didn't find myself being like, stop it. Right. Like it is very repetitive. Like, no question. You will eventually hear the same voice lines over and over and over, but there's enough explosions and shenanigans and things popping and airdrops and items coming in and stuff. Like, there's enough sounds between that it breaks it up a little, right? Because what I often think of is like, if you ever played like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter with a friend who wasn't a good friend, and they used like a cheap series of combos you couldn't break out of. So like in Mortal Kombat 2, you could do the Scorpion like,
get over here.
Yeah, and then you have to hear that over and over, right? Or someone who just stands in the corner and just goes, Hadouken, 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 and it's like, stop. This is going to end our friendship. You have to stop. Our friendship is going to die with the penultimate sound of a Hadouken and then the ultimate sound of me punching you in the face, right? Like, it's just, it never gets to that dark place. You think it would for how repetitive some of the voice acting is, but it's thinned out enough that you're okay.
Well, and I would make the argument that it's because first of all, I found the worms' voices charming, you know, again, like with the animation.
It's a good word for it.
But I think that's because the negative ones are always spread out enough that it's not going to bother you. So, generally speaking, there's no Hadouken button where, there's no thing that a worm can spam that's going to, frustrate you like that, where it's like, oh, well, I guess they're calling in another airdrop. It's like, no, man, you got one of those, and you can't even use it until like 5 rounds in, so you're not going to see that a lot. And even the, bye-bye, like that, which would be annoying if you were constantly hearing that. Two things is, one is that sometimes that's a good noise because you killed the other guy. But then also two, that normally a fair amount of time passes between each one of those, so I'd say that there is never a point where the .wav file is being spammed at you where the emotion associated with that is a negative one, whereas if you hear Hadouken, I remember playing Street Fighter 2 recently where I was like, I swear to God, if the computer Hadoukens me one more time, I am going to punch Ryu in the dick.
And then I did, because he did. I think
the one other annoying one of that, the Hadouken stuff like that, the noise that still keeps me up at night is and this is a weird one, it's the sound of somebody putting up their shield in Smash Brothers, which it makes it very it's kind of like a flip sound, right? The reason why is because we had a mutual friend in college that I lived with, and you can do that and do a speed dodge. And he had finally mastered the technique of speed dodging to the point where, he would dodge around you, grab you, and throw you. And then you'd go to swing and he'd just keep dodge, 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 throw. Dodge, 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 throw. And I was like, and literally I just paused the controller because I was angrier than I had been in some time in my life, I was still in my 20s, I was young, we're all more impulsive back then, but I had not been that angry in some time. I just put the controller down and I said, we're done. And he was like, oh, what, are you mad that you're losing? I'm like, it is going to take us 15 minutes for you to kill me once, and I have 4 more lives left. I'm not willing to dedicate an hour to this endeavor. We're done. And he's like, oh, do you want to play some more tomorrow? I'm like, no, you don't understand. We are done forever with this game. I will never play this with you again. And I am a man of my word. That was the last time we ever played that game together.
Well, to be fair, he wasn't playing it, right? He was, because that's not fun. That's not playing the game. It completely violates the spirit of the game. It's like someone who says, oh, well, there's nothing in the rules that says a dog can't play basketball. And it's like, yeah, I guess, but generally speaking, I don't expect you to sick your Rottweiler on me while I'm making a free throw.
The exemplar of that, because it's actually this is completely afield, but we'll bring it back in a second. But the name of that is it's social norms, right? Is that not everything's in the rules because we expect for social norms to be consistently in play. So when you're playing a video game and you're playing it for fun, if there is a way to break the game, it's like, well, that's not the point of it, right? The exemplar that I heard once that I've always latched on to, which is to say that if you and I sit down and say we're going to play a game of chess, it does not say anywhere in the rules that I can't break a chair over your face, which means you can no longer play the game, which means that you forfeit and I win, right? And it doesn't say it in the rules. No, it doesn't. But generally speaking, when playing a game of chess, one expects to not get chair-faced. So, yeah, it's that. But no, I did not have anything in this game that made my blood come to a rolling boil like it did in that particular instance.
The one thing that is, I think, even close to, in my experience, being borderline annoyingly repetitive. It is annoyingly repetitive, but it's in a super condensed time horizon, which is if a bunch of worms fall down and are bumping into each other. So if a bunch of worms are near a slope and you throw a grenade at them and they all kind of slide, or they slide into each other down the slope or whatever, then they do the ouch, 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 ouch. They designed the friction, I guess the coefficient of friction is relatively high. So even on those really steep, Skyrim mountain slopes that you can climb with a horse, they don't slide endlessly. They slide into each other. It's annoying for a second because they're all crying out in pain, but that quickly ends. And that situation does not come up very regularly. So even the closest example I can think of to this noise is annoying, partially because it's repetitive, partially because it's being delivered in this super high-pitched voice that is otherwise perfectly charming, but you found a way to push it past the level of comfort. They still were like, oh, but it's only going to take a second. It's like, oh, it's just a second. Oh, yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
I can deal with that. Yeah, and I think that to your point is that it happens very infrequently, because that would get super annoying if it was something that came up regularly. But to me, the way it telegraphed in my mind was, it's like, oh God, oh God, oh God, like everybody's just running into each other and like, shit, like that kind of thing. So, so it, to me, just like when Peter Griffin does that, like if every episode had 5 minutes of him doing that, it would be just mind-blowingly annoying. But the fact that it's just occasionally happens, like, they're all running into each other. And again, like you said, is it ends regularly. And I think that I found some joy in it simply because it was not eating up a lot of my life. Like if literally I had minutes dedicated to listening to this, I would have gotten really annoyed. But once in a while, having to deal with it for, like you said, 3 to 5 seconds, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can deal with that.
Yeah, it's like any other silly cartoony thing. It's you got to be careful you don't overuse it, right? Because a lot of like what I'm kind of thinking of as a good parallel is like SpongeBob's laugh. Like his laugh is heinous, but I guarantee you, if you watch an episode, that there's probably a minimum amount of space between that noise that they either don't go under, or if they do, they play it for laughs in universe where the characters are aware that his laugh is annoying. Right. And so like that kind of, oh, we have this tool. It's a spice, right? I would like some salt on my steak. I don't want a pile of salt that obscures the steak entirely. Like then it's not good anymore. More salt is not better forever and ever.
The salt content in that dish was 10% below a lethal dose. Oh, I shouldn't have had seconds.
I do still regularly say, this is the saltiest thing I ever tasted, and I once ate a heaping bowl of salt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, look, the plank got sick again. How come every time I cook, the plant gets sick? Try to explain that, Professor, with all of your science. Anyways, God, I haven't seen that. I mean, how long has it been since those episodes air and we can still quote them? That's that is portions of our
praise
brain.
Or damning praise.
Yeah, I don't know. But the thing that I always bums me out about that is it's like literally I have areas of my brain dedicated apparently to that information, but there's like way more critical information that I forget, despite being told several times. So it's like, man, brain, could you hang on to the stuff that I need you to hang on to and kind of delete out some of the more nonsensical stuff? It says, nope, TV quotes. Here you go. Thanks, brain.
Good job. good braining.
Gameplay?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about the controls and mechanics. Anyway, I wonder how many people have ever looked at the chapter markers and been like, it's not, where is this section of the episode? The controls, I was actually a little, I didn't, the N64, as we have joked about many times, was not my console du jour when I was that age. And so every time we play an N64 game, I kind of look at the controller and I'm like, what's wrong with you? How did you end up like this? This game actually has nearly identical controls to its PC contemporary. I know because I checked. Because I was messing with the aiming, right? And I was kind of like, I don't know I don't have a golf dotted line to tell me where my bazooka blast is going to go. Like, how am I supposed to aim? This is hard. And so it turned out that a friend of mine was like, oh, I have the Steam version of this game. And I was like, can I can I play it for like 30 seconds, just literally long enough to see if these controls are any different? And they're not. They're exactly the same. And when I kind of stepped back and realized, I was like, okay, it's a beloved franchise. These controls are consistent on a keyboard and a friggin' N64 controller, which could not be much more different from each other. So I was like, they're like this for a reason. And what I realized is that the little aiming reticle is, what would you say, like less than 5 worm lengths away from your worm. It's very close to you.
Yes.
Right? It's very close. So you only have a vague idea the direction you're aiming, because there's no way that I'm aware of to draw that line further out or to move the reticle further away from you. Like, that's all of the information you get. If you can imagine like a geometry textbook, like the little curve at the base of the angle where they write the number, it's like that far away from the joint, right? So you have very little information to go on until you've been playing the game a lot and you start to internalize this. But many of the weapons can be fired more than once on a given turn. And when you place the aiming reticle and you fire, when you get your second shot, it's right where you left it. So if you were a little high or a little low, you just have to make a small adjustment from right there and it stays there. You don't have to like balance the thumbstick at a certain angle. On the PC version, you don't have to like hold the mouse exactly at a certain spot so that it'll stay that way. So I don't think it's enough mechanical information to allow you to rapidly internalize aiming in this game. But I do think they made the right decision in saying, we will leave it right where you put it. And so that you can look on the screen and like literally trace with your finger if you want to, and try and decide how straight that line is. It did not immediately stand out to me as, oh, this is the right way to do this. But I honestly think it is. I think the weird ass way they position the reticle with the thumbstick, I think it's actually the right way to do it, given the fact that they don't want to show you like a trajectory arc.
Right. Yeah, no, the main thing. So, I mean, I didn't struggle that much with the controls, but again, I think that a lot of it was because is carryover again. Hey, no, that brings it back. Weird stuff that my brain is held onto, right? You know, that's why we were talking about that before, was that I could plant the seed so I could do a callback to it right now. Balance. So I didn't really struggle that much with that. But the thing that really hit home for me was just how punishing for one player mode is. First of all, now I'm going to throw some things out there. Let me know if I'm because I looked for it. I couldn't find it. There's no difficulty setting on quick play. Is that accurate?
I could not find one.
Okay, cool. That was similar to my experience. So there's one way to quick play the game, man. You want to play a quick game of Worms? That's fine. But you better know exactly what you're doing, because there's 50 different weapons. They all behave wildly differently. The game tells you in no way how they all behave. And the computer is an expert at using all of them. You know, you are going in like learning how to aim with a Nerf gun, and you are going up against 5 Navy SEALs. You know, it's like Teddy and a bunch of first graders all going in against a bunch of Navy SEALs. And eventually, after years of practice and training, I have no doubt that when they all turn 18, that group of first graders could potentially hold their own with the Navy SEALs. But as it stands right now, the Navy SEALs are winning big time. And the issue that I have with that is not, I mean, take a game like Dark Souls, right? I mean, like that, it's borne out that type of thing of saying like you are a small person in this much grander thing can work. One, kind of feel that feeling is antithetical to the complete aesthetic of the game, right? You know,
this is not meant to be a contemporary of Dark Souls.
Correct.
This is not a colleague of Dark Souls.
Yeah. This is not meant to be like a look at how small you are and how uncaring the universe is. Now get your zany worms together and shoot each other like that. That doesn't sound right. So it's antithetical to the aesthetic. It's also antithetical to the gameplay, because if you make it so that way the cycle time, right? I mean, like because basically once you go down a worm, like it's one or two mistakes and it's pretty unrecoverable, you know? So even though like, oh, well, I've still got one worm. It's like, yeah, you got one worm, but they got five. And again, you're a first grader. They've got Navy SEALs. This isn't going to be a kindergarten cop scenario. So with all that being said, is what that does is it quashes exploration, right? You don't try all the new things because, hey, you know, if this one turn or this one action goes wrong, well, I've got like 15 other actions. I'm kind of ahead. So I can take a risk with this one. It's like, nope, even if I play the game from my seat perfectly, there is a high likelihood that I'm going to lose within the first 5 turns. Even though the game won't be over, I'm going to lose in the first 5 turns. You know, so man, I literally had to just take a breath and make peace with the fact that I was going to completely lose for a while just to even try most of the weapons and see how they worked. And I don't think that that's what they were going for.
No, and this was my experience because I had put my hands on this game before this playthrough, but so fleetingly that I was coming to this with pretty fresh eyes, right? But you had played it before, so it still technically counts. I tried to go through the tutorial, and the tutorial is just a complete waste of life. It does not give you nearly enough information. And just quick throwback to visuals, there are instructions on the tutorial screen and on the mission screen. Like before you actually start the combat encounter, it's like, here's what you're going to be doing. If you hold down on the thumbstick, the text scrolls. There is nothing on screen to indicate whether or not there is more text below the fold. So you just got to check every time, and that's bad design. It's bad design in any game. It's just bad visual design, right? Like even if you're designing, imagine if I showed you a newspaper that had a single sentence on it, like you wouldn't then assume that the rest of the story is on the other side. If you unfold and open up the newspaper, you'd just be like, oh, I guess that's it, right? No, they have all kinds of cues to indicate that there's more. It literally says like continued on page 8, right? So this is not that. Once you even know what the tutorial wants of you, they're garbage. They're timed. You're punished for failure. They give you tasks without really making it clear how you might go about potentially completing those tasks. And then after I got through like a couple of the tutorials, I was like, all right, okay, I'm just going to go try the missions, I guess, because like an idiot, I was thinking like, oh, the story will follow a difficulty curve. It doesn't. They just immediately dump you into complicated scenarios and they're like, solve this problem, genius. So that was not a great experience. So unfortunately, I had this really circuitous route to get to quick play, which is where I should have started in the first place. And then it took me several rounds of quick play before I was like, okay, I got a bunch of crap in my inventory. I got a whole army of first graders that have to somehow kill these Navy SEALs. So I'm just going to burn a few rounds of quick play trying all the buttons, right? So I just, on every worm's turn, I would just be like, what does this do? What does this do? What does this do? What does this do? And then after I had done that enough times, I was like, okay, now I have enough crayons in my crayon box that I feel like I can color a picture that won't just be solid black, right? From corner to corner.
I think it would have been solid red, man.
That's true. It would not have been crayon. So that was frustrating because I was like, this game, like the mechanics of the game seem really excited. I sure wish there was someone here to teach them to me.
Right. Including the game, you know?
Yes, it's just ridiculous. Like the learning curve expects that you're playing this with your friend who already knows how to play the game.
Or that you're playing with your friend that doesn't know how to play the game, you know? Because that's the thing is that the game, and this is the thing is, literally my note says, made to be played with 2 humans, you know? Because if you're playing it with a human who is a Navy SEAL and you're a first grader, they'll teach you how to be a Navy SEAL. They'll walk you through and be like, I wouldn't do that. Be careful with this. Watch out for this. You know, they will be your guide and mentor, right? Or they will also be a first grader and you'll both just shoot each other in the face with Nerf guns and laugh your butts off, you know? there's just no, and again, it's like like you said, there's so much, the game seems so exciting and the visuals are so exciting and fun and interesting. There's so many mechanics. There's so many different guns and you can pick up new guns and there's just all this sort of stuff. It would be like if Enter the Gungeon, like all of the different guns were hidden by some weird arcane way to get at them or how to use them, Could you imagine if every time you picked up a new gun, you weren't in a room by yourself where you could fire it a few times and kind of figure out how it works? If like literally you picked up the gun and all of a sudden 50,000 enemies approached you, you'd immediately cycle back to your normal weapon and start using that because that's what you know how to use.
It's like going into the garage of someone who's really handy, right? And they're like, oh, will you grab a hammer over there? And you just look at their immaculate tool bench with things you don't even know the name of, let alone what they're used for. And you're just like, is this the kind of hammer you want? And they're just like, no, not that hammer. The other hammer. This one? No, God, forget it. I'll just get it.
I'm obviously making a plumbus. I need a certain type of hammer, you moron.
I need a plumbus hammer, idiot.
Yeah. And so I can also understand, though, if you're making a game that's made to be played with two players. So, I mean, I think that before we really go too much further, we have to just establish this game's made to be played with two players, right?
This game is made to be played with not only other humans, but all future iterations of this game seem to have changed from this version of the game, is that you can play with more humans.
Yes.
Like so, the principal difference between the most recent version of the game, because some of the streamers that I follow have been playing it sometimes, the most recent version of the game compared to this one that's 22 years old is, 5 humans can play it instead of 2 humans, right? It's like everything else was working fine. More humans for more human shenanigans.
Right. For more of the lulls. Right. So I mean, that's the thing, right? It's game was made to be played that way. So I can understand if they said, look, we made a game to be played with 2 players. That's what we made. You can't play chess with 1 player. You got to play with 2, right? You can't play solitaire with, but you gotta have 2 people. Okay. And then somebody's like, well, not everybody's going to have 2 people and we want to sell to those people. They said, okay, well, I mean, we'll throw an AI in there. And then they just basically said, okay, here's an AI. It's basically God, and that's why I'm just convinced that the AI does know how the lines are drawn, because I don't think they put any effort into it. And I get that there's a limited amount of money, right? And if you had an extra $10,000 and you're like, look, I can either spend that $10,000 on AI or spend the $10,000 on the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. Which one of those 2 things do you want in this game? Holy Hand Grenade, hands down. Let me set the number of worms I'm fighting against. That's it. That's 0 cost, right? So just let me say, I want 5 worms and I want to fight 2. That's it. Because that way, even though they are gods, right? I got 5 guys, so I'll put my 2 in the corner, and they will just be figuring out I'll have my R&D section of worms where they'll just be trying out all of the different weapons on each other.
So you have your James Bond worm and like your Q worm.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my god, that burned him to near death, man. He's almost on the floor. Hey, what does this dynamite do? Like, how does this work? And then I'll have my other 3 worms attacking the other 2 worms with their tried and true bazookas until the boys in the back room come up with a triple axe hacker or whatever. That's I'm conflating 2 stories. A triple sling jigger. That's what it is.
There you go.
And then all of a sudden my armies can now use that, right? Just that to me is the failure. Everything up to that point, it's like, I get it, man. You made a game for 2 people, understood. You have a limited amount of money and you spent more time putting more zany stuff in the game, understood. Why didn't you just let me pick how many worms I'm fighting against? Like that to me is the failure,
Yeah, I thought a lot during this playthrough about your nihilistic playstyle in some games where you're like, I stubbed my toe, better just kill myself. And then, you'll just start a whole level or world or a section of the game or run over if you feel like that's the mechanically advantageous thing to do, knowing that your time as the player has a high importance to you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, you're not making that decision flippantly. It's that, like, you know, you got stuff to do. So when I was in my experimentation phase and I was trying to come out of my what do all the buttons do, you know, phase, there were a couple times where like I loaded up and the worms were not positioned in a way that was particularly advantageous. And one of their Navy SEALs shot the floor out from underneath me. And like 4 of my 5 worms died in a single shot. And I just pressed start and then quit, back out, and then just press A as fast as I could to start another quick start game, which I mean, it's cartridge game, so it's all pretty fast. But I was just like, okay, like I really wish there was a way to make this experimentation phase a little bit like less reloady, you know, like I want to experiment. I want to learn the game. Please let me play this game that I want to learn. Like it really does not support that well. And because I didn't have a second controller, I couldn't play 2-player in this and then have it like have the other player just be no one who sat there idly. And if the game design is expecting you to do that, which granted, I don't think that it is, but that's incredibly lazy, right? It's incredibly lazy to expect the player to say, oh, well, if you want to test out how the moves work, just plug in a second controller, because we'll only allow you to play 2-player if there's 2 physical controllers plugged in. Plug in a second controller, and then you can do whatever you want. Imagine the modern like Smash Ultimate with its roster of 7,000 characters. If
million characters. Look at me, how many characters there are.
Yeah. Imagine that without the clean room that lets you just do whatever you want against whoever you want for as long as you want, right? In you know, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, like, yeah, you don't need the clean room in those early games because you just play the game and you'll figure it out. There's not that much to figure it out. Worms is on the other side of that dividing line. There is so much, and the game does not tell you. It just expects you to experiment and figure things out. And what really broke my heart about it is there's so much opportunity for fascinating, creative solutions to problems. Like, yeah, you can use the blowtorch to dig a hole through a wall. You can also use the shotgun. Like, you can, you know, you can try and use explosives to like get down to a guy who's below you, but you also have the little pneumatic drill that'll drill like straight down, right? Later you get a teleporter and you can, but you can't do anything else on the turn where you teleport. So where you teleport really matters. And sometimes if you're really lucky, you can teleport right next to a dude and fall on him and push him into the water, right? Like there's so much depth to the mechanics that it leads to tremendous opportunities for creativity. And the only way to tease that stuff out is by paying the cost of time. There's no, unless you have someone to tell you, there's no other way to discover that stuff. You have to just put in raw time. And that's a bummer.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, it's, and again, this is where definitely my nostalgia goggles come into play, which is that I pretty much exclusively played this game with friends, you know, and we would just get together and Nerf ball each other to death and just laugh. I mean, just giggle until our parents came into the room and said, guys, go to sleep. You know, I mean, it was a blast.
It's 4-player GoldenEye.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was so much fun. And then I do remember playing this game a little bit on 1 player, but at that point I had played it enough with friends that it seemed I had some idea of what I could do, you know? Yeah, it's an issue. I think too, to kind of ebb off of that flow, which is that, you know, as we said, none of the weapons kind of telegraph anything. Like you said, some weapons you can use multiple times or still use a weapon afterwards, like the parachute or the grappling hook, right? Some of them you can't, like. And there's not, now there is a mechanical reason behind it. So for example, I understand if it was like, okay, if it's move related stuff, then you can use a weapon afterwards. You don't need to waste your whole move moving. Okay. Not true though with the teleporter. teleporter's movement based, but that shoots your turn, you know? So I used the teleporter first, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh man, I really need to get from point A to point B. But I don't want to use the parachute because that'll put me right next to the guy. And then my turn's going to be over. And then I was like, I don't know. I don't really have another option. So I just did it. And it was like, okay, you can keep going. I'm like, oh, I can? Oh, well, this is game changing. Here's a landmine. I'll see you later. And then I ran off. But again, it just, without telegraphing that, it just doesn't help.
So I'm gonna admit my own ignorance and defer to your worm wisdom. That information is not conveyed anywhere in the UI, right?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Not that I can discern. It
doesn't tell you how many steps you can take, which weapons you can fire more than once, which tools you can use, and then also use a weapon, right? That information just has to be experimented with and then memorized.
Correct. And the worst part is that the weapon that they default you to is a one and done. You know?
Yeah, bazooka.
Yeah, the bazooka, right? Like you fire the bazooka, you can move afterwards, and then your turn's done. You can move afterwards unless you take damage, which I actually do like that mechanic because I like the idea of, you being able to move afterwards unless you screw up and hurt yourself, at which case then it's like, now you're done. So I kind of like that. But that being said so that's your default weapon. So directionally, there's no reason to think that the majority of the player base would not have that be their first experience with weapons in the game altogether, and thus extrapolate that all weapons work that way, So until all of a sudden you find the exception to that rule, and then that's almost more disheartening because all of a sudden, okay, all weapons are one and done. And then in my experience, you use the parachute and it's like, oh, not all weapons are one and done. I have now found the exception to Newtonian physics that has now shattered physics, because now I have to question all of the weapons. It's like, oh my God, I just did one thing that literally brought up 50 different problems,
Yeah, it's exciting if you feel like you have time to now go plumb these depths. And it's very frustrating if you're like, I thought this problem was solved. And now I know it's super duper not, right? And a lot of the things, there's kind of like a value that you can say like, oh, the teleporter kind of broken, right? If you could instantly teleport anywhere, even just once, and then murder whoever you appeared next to, like that wouldn't be very fun. Everyone would just use the teleporter as their first turn, and whoever went first would just win, and that would be that, right? So you gotta say like, okay, this costs too many awesome points, and so all of your awesome points are going to movement on this one. This other one, only half of your awesome points are going to movement. So you can still work, but not everything, because some of the weapons are so powerful that they take all of your awesome points. So you can't use an all awesome points weapon if you moved at all. And I'm glad we're talking about this because there's the teeniest little visual inside the weapon select menu to let you know you've already spent too many awesome points, which is something you can't use, is kind of like grayed out. It's like sort of a pixelated kind of effect. It was the N64. They couldn't do much with those few dots, but like you can tell like, oh, this is a solid icon. I can select that weapon or tool. This one, not so much. But by then you've already spent the awesome points. So hopefully you open the menu and you notice which things are now grayed out that weren't grayed out a second ago. And then hopefully you remember, I must have spent more awesome points than I can use to do that thing as a second order action, right? That's a hard way to learn that lesson, right? Because then there's just a lot of trial and error. Okay, I did this. Let me open the menu. Let me see if I still have enough awesome points to do this thing. Okay, these things are grayed out. These things aren't. Okay, now I did this. Let me see if I have enough awesome points. And I don't know how deep that goes. I think it's only 2, but if it's even just 3, that adds a network effect. Now you have many, many times the additional complexity. And if it's 4, if some things you could do 4 things of on a turn because it's such a low awesome points cost, oh dear God, like.
And all of that would be very at an interesting and fun amount of depth if it wasn't for the fact that you're getting curb stomped the entire time you're trying to figure it out, right? I mean, like, because I could definitely say, like, look, this game has, I would love to at this point in the show say, this game has a complexity to which I do not have the time to really understand. However, if I had I enjoyed the amount of time that I spent plumbing that depth, and I imagine continuing to understand the complexity would continue to add joy to my life, right? But the issue is that, you know, if you're if you're sitting there trying to like figure out, you know, how physics problems work, like you're going through your physics textbook and you're like, oh my gosh, like sine and cosine now actually have applicable meaning to my life. Like I can use these to calculate this, and whoa, wait, what if I were to twist the cannon this way and fire it with an initial velocity of what, and the whole time, like somebody's just taking a baseball bat and just clocking you in the back of the head with it, you know? Like it's like, well, this would be fun if it wasn't for this other thing. And so they engineered themselves an either or situation, which is frustrating, because everything you were just describing, I was like, man, I don't have the time for that. But some people would. But I definitely don't have the time to spin those plates on the tops and also get hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat.
I mean, pretty much any activity other than be the recipient of a hit to the back of the head with a baseball bat is hard to do while getting hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat. If that's your objective, then it's super easy. If
that's the only thing you've got on your to-do list that particular day, then you're good. But if it's that, and then subsequently anything else, and I used to tell people that, and they'd be like, oh, well, you know, I don't have a time machine. I'm like, I have a time machine. I really am. Like, yeah, it's a baseball bat that says time machine. And I hit you in the head and you wake up in the future, you know? And then they like look at me like kind of either confused or horrified as to whether or not they get the joke. And I'm like, it's a teleporter too. 80% of the time it teleports you to the hospital. 20% of the time it teleports you to a garbage dumpster.
But hospital or dumpster, it will be the future.
It will. You will wake up in the future.
So on that happy note, we want to talk about whether or not we think it held up.
Yeah, man. What do you think? What do you give this one?
So you actually just came really close a second ago to my summary thoughts, which are, I have to admit that I think this game does not require nostalgia goggles. I would say this game is no nostalgia goggles required, with the two caveats that you either need a tremendous amount of time and patience because the game will not give you the mechanics. You need to figure them out through studious patience, right? Or that you only ever play this game with other people, because like chess, like tango, like a dinner for two, I believe this is an experience meant to be enjoyed with, you know, one other person on this version, or, you know, several other people on the more modern versions that could support a bunch of players at once. Because every person I talk to about this, every streamer I observe playing the more modern versions, they're all doing exactly what you described you did when you were a kid. Just shooting yourself in the face with a bazooka and just laughing and laughing and laughing. And you can't really have that experience in the quick play single player. You can have the, oh, I nailed this amazing trick shot experience. You can have the, I came up with a really clever solution to this problem experience. But the game isn't optimized for those things. The game is optimized for shenanigans. And it's just hard to enjoy shenanigans in a solo experience. Shenanigans is a group experience. That's why the word has so many letters. It's, you bring your friends, right? So I weirdly, like, I didn't really enjoy playing this that much, but I would say, like, as an artifact of game design, no nostalgia goggles required, but for the love of God, don't play it alone.
And so this is where I think that, you know, I'm going to start working, you know, so I agree with you. No nostalgia goggles required. Right. But this is where the kind of new side taxonomy. So again, our show's nostalgia goggles, right? So that's the rating, right? But there's a sub rating system that I'm working with, which is how well made is the game, right? on one axis, and then how enjoyable was the game or the gaming experience on the other one, right? So this game is lawful evil, right? So it's incredibly well crafted and was super not enjoyable, right? Because there are some games that are chaotic good, right? They're just tragic, just garbage games, but man, they're a blast and a half, right? You know? And then there's Jekyll and Hyde, which is chaotic evil, right? Because the game is just completely on fire and a misery to play, right? And that game, I think we could all agree, some games just want to watch the world burn, right? So this game's lawful evil, right? You know, where I was just playing it, and I'm like, there's so much here, and it's so well crafted, and the physics are so consistent, and I hate this. I hate every second of it. I'm so angry right now, you know, like it was just so painful for all the reasons that we said. It's again, you know, like is in order for this thing to go to lawful good, you have to have a party, you know, like you need a full party of players, and I think that for each additional person you add to the party, it goes up an alignment category, right? Until it's just this great, lawfully good game. But man, I'll tell you what, this gaming experience, I would more than happily have misjudged, shot that bazooka in my face, and just said, bye-bye.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black. And you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained. At the end of it all, gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is saved, but who cares? We both know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is saved. So you're more along for the ride.